Joker, Folie A Deaux. Folie A Deaux. Not good at French. Okay. Let's start. Look, I'm not exactly one of those angry reviewers, but sometimes I want to be a professional angry reviewer, but mostly for the ones that they kind of deserve it. But I even thought a lot of people say that that's kind of overreaching. I know that I'm not exactly that kind of guy, except for the ones that that they deserve. But usually people, they kind of accuse them, for, being kind of like overly unhappy and all this stuff. And you know the idea, something like that. But then comes movies like the one that I saw, of course, Joker, Folie A Deaux. Okay, how do I start? Let's talk about my perspective before the movie. The first Joker. I remember that I watched that movie when it came out in 2019. I was fresh on moving from this apartment, and it was something. I really liked that one. It was a great movie, and even thought that one took a lot of creative liberties of the lore of the character of the Joker, which is the most well-known Batman villain. I like Batman. Now Batman has been, it's been going to some wrong directions, but this is not that kind of vlog. The thing is that Joker was always this kind of like psychopathic character that, in a way, it was also interesting due to his enigma and, well, larger than life personality. Even though, of course, he's a villain, he's a psychopath. And also he was all kind of like shrouded in mystery. And the Joker movie, it kind of took its own direction, almost like one of those standalone graphic novels that sometimes came out, in which they tried to explore the Joker in a different manner. And, well, that movie was a big success. It was a great movie. I still like it. I haven't watched it much though. Sorry for the sirens. But I still like it. Then they announced the trailer, and in many people's eyes, and probably myself included, we felt like this is a movie that didn't need a sequel. Even though I am mostly open-minded on sequels, but then people get kind of like the bad omen when it was announced that it was going to be a musical. Not exactly me. I thought it was kind of like an interesting approach. I'm not exactly kind of like a hater of musicals. Nowadays, it kind of feels like it is easy to hate on musicals because they think that usually these songs are glorified playlists, and they detract from the plot. Most of those critiques are valid, although there are some that I do like. The Sound of Music is one of them. South Park Bigger and Longer Uncut is also a great musical. People talk about La La Land, but I didn't like much the ending of La La Land. You know what? I don't like Moulin Rouge. There's some. I thought that the main character was a creep on how can I say on Moulin Rouge. But the point is that I accept musicals, but then the whole thing exploded 1 month before the premiere, in which critics who saw the movie early they began to rip it apart. In my head, I was like, wow, was that bad? Is it bad? Still, I wasn't sure, but I was kind of like, in a way, open-minded. That is until I kind of make a little bit more research, and I saw a little bit more about the director, Todd Phillips. And I'm not exactly kind of like mesmerized with his work, but I was actually surprised that he was also the director of, what was it, the Hangover movies, which people say that the first one was good and the second one was terrible. I can't judge because I haven't seen any of the Hangover movies, but the one that actually got my attention is that I could probably see why he was, some of the mannerisms, why he was inspired for the Joker movie. And that is because that guy, he was also responsible for making this documentary about this crazy death metal artist named G.G. Allen. Let's say that this guy was so crazy that he even threw feces to his audience. I'm not gonna go too much into detail, but let's say that he was a crazy guy that that it was kind of like interesting. So probably I could see some of the inspirations of Arthur Fleck, the Joker from that movie. But either way, I had some low expectations on that movie. I didn't thought it was gonna be that good or that bad. I only went from the hearsay, but like always, I was kind of like the guy who says, you know what? Sometimes to have a kind of like a concrete opinion, you gotta go and make the opinion for yourself. Go watch it and judge it for yourself. If there is one thing that I can describe this movie with just one word, is disappointment. This movie is probably the biggest disappointment I have seen this year. And considering that this year I saw movies like Madame Web and the American Society of Magical You-Know-What. I could clearly say that I saw movies that are worse than this one. I can even say that Borderlands is a worse movie and even though I never saw Borderlands, I only say it is the worst movie without I even seeing it because it has that Jack Nabbit that I don't like. But even though saying that I've seen worse movies than this one, that doesn't still excuse that this movie was totally disappointing. And it didn't need it to be like that. But it happened. It got kind of like the problem that most sequels had. And well, it got what it deserved. It is panned by most critics. Although there are some people that are trying to defend a little bit too hard on this movie. Although here's the thing, that kind of also made a conflict within myself, in which saying that probably the biggest enemy of movie criticism is its own open-mindedness. We try to be open-minded to almost everything, but then we kind of let go on the things that we just want to say, even though it doesn't deserve sometimes the praises that it may or may not deserve. And sometimes being so open-minded, it kind of abstain ourselves from saying this movie legitimately sucks. even though they have kind of like its own things. Which funnily enough, a week ago, I saw a movie with some friends. It was an awful movie called The Mousetrap, which is basically a Gravitas Ventures movie about a slasher Mickey Mouse, in which, of course, is trying to capitalize on the copyright thing of Steamboat Willie. It was so bad, but I liked that movie more, mostly because I knew what was it. I knew what it is, and it's so inept that I just took it as face value, almost like like the scene of Paranorman when Norman is watching this awful movie, but still he finally that's kind of like entertaining or something like that. But Joker Folie A Deaux it has things that are done right, but a lot for the wrong reason. Unfortunately, it gets the criticism that it deserved. And the more I started thinking about this movie, it gets progressively worse and worse. I came out of the movie disappointed, but I was wanting to give some credit on some parts. But the more I think about it, I was thinking that does it really deserve it? So, all right, let's start off. So, if you remember, the first movie is about exploring the character of the Joker through the eyes of this mentally challenged guy known as Arthur Fleck, who his life was kind of like reeling on the dumps, and of course circumstances happen and then explodes, and then he becomes the martyr known as, of course, the Joker, the psychotic clown from the DC comics that a lot of people are a fan of. And of course, he becomes kind of like a celebrity, a beacon of society's woes, and that they felt ignored and all this stuff. And it brought up a lot of catastrophe and all this stuff. And of course, he killed off a celebrity in live television. So this sequel takes place 2 years after that. Arthur Fleck is in jail. He is basically going through the Arkham Asylum therapy. I don't know I don't know if it's Arkham Asylum. Well, it is Arkham. Yeah, now I remember. It is Arkham Asylum, but the movie technically just say that it's New York. Apparently, Arkham Asylum is a new Arkham. I'm not Arkham. Apparently, Gotham City takes place in New York. But okay, Arthur Fleck, he's in jail. He is going through, a lot of things. Like, for example, the cops treat him like a joke. Basically, the people outside, they just they treat him as a celebrity because, well, he made the right choice on rebelling against society. And well, Arthur is kind of like indifferent. That is until he meets Lee Quinn. Lee Quinn is basically Harley Quinn, and both of them fall in love. Arthur falls in love with her, but she also falls in love with him with the thing that, well, she likes when he becomes kind of like the Joker. And that's kind of like the whole crux of the movie, in which everyone, even his lawyer, are kind of trying to explore him and saying that this guy, he basically was a guy who just snapped. He probably has a double personality. One is Arthur, and the other one is the Joker, and they just want to remove him from the Joker personality. And this goes on because he has to face trial. The trial of the murder of the 6 people that he killed during the first movie. And of course, if he's found guilty, he's gonna get the chair. And from this point on, the movie is both this love story and this courtroom drama, along with kind of like this psychological study about this guy, and probably another psychological, kind of like this psychological study if this guy was, who actually has some kind of mental illness. And boy, that if it wasn't for a musical, maybe this could have gone interestingly, but not exactly, because the musicals kind of put a stop on some layers. I'll get to that in a moment. But you know what? Let's go a little bit with the characters, because if there's a little bit of a silver lining of this big disappointment of a movie, is that Joaquin Phoenix as Joker, he still works. He is a great actor, and in this one, of course, he doesn't ham it up, even though he might know that this movie doesn't work, but he give it all. He as his Joker, he's great. He does a magnificent job, and he still is entertaining for the most that he does. And given some kind of a humanized type of Joker, is interesting. Yeah, we know that it's entertaining sometimes to see, the crazy psychopath of Joker, right? For the sake that, well, we have to give Batman a kind of like this big antithesis. And in this case, kind of make him kind of like a more humanized but yet psychotic. It's interesting. It's more, and he's more kind of like a more pitiful character than it is. Although, unfortunately, the movie kind of treats him a little bit too pitiful in a way. It's much more pitiful and a little bit more depressing, to the point that people, they kind of say that something is not right with how they're treating this character. And that goes along, of course, that the biggest crux that this movie has is when they involve Lady Gaga as Harley Quinn. Lynn Quinn, they call her there, but she's kind of like Harley Quinn still in that one. And I'm not a big fan of Lady Gaga, although I do acknowledge that she can sing and she can act, but there's not much things that I can say about her. I know that she was critically acclaimed. What was that movie? What was it? A Star Is Born, as far as I can remember. I think it was that. But honestly, I mean, she's not a bad singer, but I don't know what to say about her. I mean, she's not terrible here, but she's not exactly that great. But I will take Lady Gaga more than Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn. I never liked Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn. And even though Lady Gaga wasn't exactly a spectacular Harley Quinn, at least I'll give her credit to say that this is a Harley Quinn that kind of works on that kind of universe, even though it kind of showcased a little bit of the problem of modern Batman nowadays. And funnily enough, most of the problem of modern Batman usually is Harley Quinn herself, and the portrayal of how they wanted to make Harley Quinn kind of like this tragic figure, and some other parts that I don't want to go there. But honestly, I still believe that the animated series version of Batman was kind of like the best Harley Quinn. But of course, when they try to bring her a little bit on the big screen, I don't know. There's something that fails on her portrayal, or sometimes she kind of comes a little bit unlikable in this, or I don't know. Well, she wasn't technically unlikable, but she kind of turns into kind of like the foil. She basically kind of becomes the biggest foil on the journey of Arthur Fleck. He falls in love with her, but she's mostly in love, with the Joker thing. But now that I think about it, ironically, that's her even in the lore, because Harley Quinn, she's mostly kind of like a masochistic character, and she has this obsession with the Joker. Although the biggest difference, of course, is that Joker in the original lore, he basically is the one that manipulates her to the point that she falls into insanity. But in this one, she just comes at, she does it for herself and kind of becomes kind of like this big fan, big stalker, and he just basically falls in love, and well, then comes, I'll get to that. Although there are some other characters. We got, of course, the security guard from Arkham who treats him like a joke, and he's always, belittling him. There's also this fan on Arkham Asylum who he doesn't appear much, but you can tell that he is kind of like this big fan, this big fan that always encourages him, and yeah. There's also the lawyer she's a little bit inept. This is a lawyer who she tried to manipulate Arthur into thinking that he didn't do anything. That Joker is basically kind of like kind of like two personalities. I know she was trying to do her job, of course, of being a liar, or trying to, pull the strings in order to get him a non-guilty verdict. But this kind of, I gotta admit that I kind of appreciate what they were going to do in this one, in which about society treating people with mental illness, thinking that it's not them, it's not them, it's society, it's not them. You had a bad childhood, it's not them. You had double personality. They were kind of like making excuses of the reason of what they were doing. So yeah, that was kind of she's a terrible lawyer. And of course, and there wasn't much character. Like, for example, let's say some of the jury, the witnesses who they accuse Arthur about this. There's the judge, and some returning character who comes to testify against him, and of course the district prosecutor, who is none other than Harvey Dent. The guy who later turns into Two-Face. Although they're mostly kind of just there and more kind of like in sidelines here and there. Everyone's doing a good job in their acting, but good acting doesn't necessarily make it kind of like a good movie. This is where I go more into the cinematography, in which this is where people are kind of finding it a little bit more forgiving in the case. Because honestly, much like I say about animation, when it's about Hollywood, it's kind of like an easy A or a B plus when you talk about cinematography, because they're professionals. They know how to do it. In this case, yeah, they do it good. It's well shot. Especially it gets ambitious when it comes in the musical part. Even though the musical part usually puts a halt on the storytelling. And I'm gonna be honest, the songs, most of them, you can find why people are saying that this is mostly an excuse to have Lady Gaga sing, because she's mostly a singer more than an actress. And they're forgettable. Even up to this day, I can't remember much of the songs. They're not terrible songs, they're just forgettable. Just forgettable to the point, and most of them kind of have like the same style of big, the big band, always, kind of like gothic in a way, because, well, this movie have a lot of, there's a lot of smoking in this movie. Everyone is smoking. And it kind of makes me think about, when you go to this lounge on the cafe and you see all these bungo beatniks, going with the bungos. And you go to a cafe and you see, that kind of a big band music. And that's how it kind of remind me. It reminds me of that episode of Rocko's Modern Life when he goes to this cafe and see Beth and Ed Bighead playing poetry and playing the bongos. That's how most of the music kind of remind me. And you can tell that there's also some level of ambition and quirky ambition into it. But there's only one moment of this movie that probably I will always remember, and that is that the movie starts with a cartoon. We get this Looney Tunes style cartoon of the Joker, which is basically kind of like comedic clip note of the final moments of the last movie, but it kind of encompasses a little bit the theme of the whole movie, in which basically it makes a metaphor of that most of the crimes that Joker committed during that fateful day, it wasn't technically him, it was his shadow. So yeah, even the title of the cartoon is called Joker and the Shadow. And this is the big theme that this movie is going through, in which Arthur is basically confronting the shadow of his own self, and little by little he's kind of seeing that maybe the whole thing what he did maybe wasn't worth it, and this kind of assassinates a little bit the kind of like the character of the Joker themselves. And I've been hearing people saying that this is probably Todd Phillips basically regretting the movie. And you know what? I can blame them, because my God, this mostly happens during the second half of the movie, where we finally get to the trial. We got kind of like this pacing of this movie that honestly, during the first half I was hooked into it. I was more mesmerized trying to see where it goes. But then we get kind of like this court scene that, well, I'm not saying that court cases are not interesting to watch. There's some that they do. I mean, I play Phoenix Wright, and some of them are kind of like entertaining. Although then comes with some kind of like questionable moments, in which, for one, of course, you know what? For the sake of taking out the suspension of disbelief, you can let people chain smoke inside the courtroom, as well as letting them later dress up like a clown. Well, let's take that out in suspension of disbelief, because even Phoenix Wright had these kind of moments. But the biggest crux is that it's basically trying to understand this Arthur character. The problem is more like in the courtroom scene, is that it's mostly trying to recap the first movie, more with exposition. Also, yeah, this is what courtrooms do. And not gonna lie, if there's some semblance of entertaining in the courtroom scenes, is when Joaquin Phoenix basically embraces his Joker persona. But then, after seemingly not much of an explanation, Arthur kind of begins to have some second thoughts about this, and then comes up, the ending. And the ending itself was the biggest reason why I don't like the movie. That the ending of the movie was self-defeatist. It kind of went against everything that went from the first movie. Sorry about that. I don't know what's going on. Probably the neighbors are watching some football game or something like that. But anyway, I found the ending self-defeatist. I found it depressing. I found it hopeless. It kind of tries to back down from the things that accomplished during the first movie, and well, it kind of makes the whole thing technically Harley Quinn's fault. Almost everything, it was Harley Quinn's fault when you put it on perspective. Well, the lawyers too, the cops too, but most of them, it kind of felt like Harley Quinn was kind of like the sole reason why it went to that route. And then we got, of course, the final moment. The final moment of the ending, in which it kind of makes it kind of like a middle finger. And this is where I caught up when some people begin to say that this is basically a middle finger to people who like the first movie because they kind of glorify this psychopath, they glorify violence, and well, it's kind of like backing down, in which saying that, well, the guys that you admire or you see basically is non-existent. It's always you. There's no such thing as a Joker. I know that I feel like I'm spoiling too much, although I didn't exactly go, kind of like in the biggest detail, I'll say, but I'm not gonna exactly go into details on the whole thing. But that ending, I don't know. I know that I'm not a guy who I'm not a guy, how can I say, that is who is gonna be supported, with psychopaths or something like that. The movie basically kind of begged you in a way to, well, support this character due to the manhandling that he had. This is technically the biggest problem when you make a villain sympathetic. Because when you make a villain sympathetic, then you make the audience sympathize with him, even it makes some of them some vicious crimes. And I get what the movie was doing, and now when you do something like that, you gotta pay what you had done. So yeah. With that, the endings suck. The movie went. My movie expectation went down. So yeah, that's the best way I can describe this movie. I'm not the kind of guy who will say that, I'm gonna hate this movie, I'm gonna rip it apart or something like that. You know what? I'll leave that to the professionals. There are professional anger ranters who can come up with better reasons why this movie sucks. I could come up with a middle ground, but maybe I'll go to the middle ground, but leaning to the not liking it. And you know what? This movie wasn't good. It was, for the most part, because perspectively, I've seen worse movies, but this was just a letdown. It was really disappointing. The only saving grace I just hope that this movie gets is probably if it can make another sequel in order to salvage the bad taste that this movie got. But that's just saying much. But honestly, with such criticism that this movie had, in which complaints about society, well, it just got what it deserved.